I wanted to ask about, the role of family in your journey of sobriety and in the seasons of life. Was like, how important was that for you? Because I'm picking up, you don't really talk about your faith very often, but it's sounds to me like you're pretty strong in your faith, you know? And I married a woman that wanted to be a traditional missionary her entire life, right? So am I. I'm fairly, I call myself a missionary in business, and I know every business says that. This is literally what I say in interviews. Like, every business owner says that. Every business says that. I know that most of them are lying. I'm not. I'm very, very serious about that. So it sounds to me like family and faith and community is quite a large part of this, even before sobriety, just in your journey. Am I
No,
right with
yeah,
that?
100%. Yeah, my story isn't that, I was living my life and we were doing good things. I started drinking, stopped drinking because I found God. That's not like I already, my faith, began when I was, in my mid-teens. And then I just, I mean, I guess some people would say I was lukewarm for a lot of years or whatever, but, when we got married, my wife had just become a Christian. Interesting testimony that she had. God very deliberately spoke to her, and then I came into the picture. We that's kind of part of her story. It's kind of fun to hear sometimes, but I was kind of like her new friend, because all her old friends she had to get rid of. But so yeah, we've always been really intentional about our faith, and we've been on many journeys of doctrines, and been in some weird stuff, and then you kind of regroup, and you kind of feel like the church lets you down or man lets you down, and just you're trying to figure all this stuff out. And but it was always the it, our heart was always to find the truth, and we were always seeking that out. And so we're a lot slower now just to jump on board with some new idea or new thought, but there was a period of time where probably I was a little bit quicker just because I didn't really have much of a. I mean, I went to church, non-denominational church, by actually a pretty famous pastor, is the guy that baptized me, Tommy Nelson. And but that was the extent of it. Like I've never really felt, like I've got a 19-year-old right now that is just kind of starting his real faith journey, and it's incredible to watch him. He's kind of a quiet personality, sort of like me, but he's very bold in a very graceful manner, and just soaking up everything he can right now, and it's so cool to watch. But he's not letting that limit his ability to actually produce in the marketplace. So that's really cool too. Like, he's got a lot going on. But yeah, it was very foundational. It had to be foundational in my sobriety, because I that's the part of realizing that I wasn't capable of controlling this, and I had just intentionally proven that to myself, well, unintentionally proven that to myself over the previous 11 months, that I wasn't capable. There's no tricks I can do. There was no amount of marathons I could run or hard things I could put on myself to get me to stop drinking. So I needed to really rely on what God was willing and ready to do in me. And so that's about the extent of I say the extent, I mean, it's a big part of the transition, of course, but that's about the extent of how loud it was or visible it was. The other thing is, the part about the message I was sending to my kids. Yeah, the previous 2 or 3 years, when we moved to our current location, we went from a really small house, like 1,200 square feet on 4 acres, really small, with pretty much all 11 kids living at home at the time, to this place. It's much bigger. We have 30 acres, and I kind of felt like I had arrived, right? And so alcohol became even more of a part. We were making decent money, more money than I'd ever made. And so I just kind of semi-retired in my mind. And part of that was a lot of these. We love entertaining and having people over and cooking, and alcohol was a big part of that. Not drunken fest, but just alcohol always was a part of it. And that was the message I was sending my kids. And so as they started, asking to have a beer or asking to have a couple beers, or we were having conversations about drinking and driving, just conversations that honestly I believe now in the right environment maybe should happen, but shouldn't be like they shouldn't be topics that you always have to talk about and work through. Like I don't have to have conversations about drinking and driving with my kids now because they're not drinking anymore. Like they may have a beer here and there or whatever, like with a buddy, but even then they're realizing like why? Like why do it? Like I never feel good afterwards and I can have just as much fun anyway. So I was sending a very mixed message about how a dad uses alcohol to escape. They were obviously seeing that. They didn't know the extent of my problem. I think I masked that really well, and I think that's a key part of my story and how I've. There's so many men out there that can mask it really well and actually can have fairly successful businesses. I think they would be more successful. Fairly successful marriages, although it would be better. Fairly successful parenting, even although it could be much better. Um, and maybe even have a handle on their fitness, to an extent if they so choose. But there's really no value being brought. So yeah, the message was very confusing, and I just became aware of that. It was a very confusing message.
So it sounds like naturally it's trickled down to
Yeah,
them that
yeah.
you had mentioned. They're like, what's the point? That makes a lot of
Al-
sense.
Almost almost immediately, this one kid, son in particular, my 19-year-old, he was my frame, 6 foot one, 100 and 40 pounds or whatever, like pretty thin, and he immediately, uh, like he put on 20 pounds in the last six just of muscle, just being intentional with his eating, not drinking anymore. But yeah, I mean, it definitely trickled down pretty quick actually. So. Yeah. And not just him, all of my children.
What's going on, guys? If you like that clip right there, you will love the full interview. You can check that out right there. I'll see you on the next video. Oh, and subscribe because we got a lot of big things coming up in the near future.